Have you ever had this embarrassing moment? Someone introduces themselves, you shake hands, you smile, and 30 seconds later, you suddenly realize something terrifying. You have absolutely no idea what their name is. Gone. Completely gone. And now you're standing there pretending everything is normal while secretly hoping they never ask, "So, what's my name?" Most people think this means they're rude, careless, or just bad with names. But psychology says something very different. Because forgetting names is usually not a sign of a weak memory. In fact, it's often the result of a brain that is doing exactly what it was designed to do. And once you understand what's happening behind the scenes, you may never feel embarrassed about it again. Here's something most people don't know. Your brain doesn't treat names the same way it treats other information. Think about it. If someone tells you that a stove is hot, your brain immediately creates connections. Heat, pain, danger, experience. But when someone says, "Hi, I'm Michael," what does the name Michael actually tell you? Nothing. It's simply a label. And labels by themselves are surprisingly difficult for the brain to hold on to, because your mind is built around meaning. It stores things that connect to emotions, experiences, and patterns. Names don't naturally come with any of those things. They're isolated. And isolated information doesn't survive very long. But that's only part of the story. The real reason names disappear so quickly is because your brain is already overloaded when meeting someone new. Without realizing it, you're processing hundreds of things at once. You're reading their facial expressions. You're judging whether they seem friendly. You're thinking about what to say next. You're trying to make a good impression. You might even be worrying about how you look. And somewhere inside all that mental activity, a name appears. Once, very quickly, with no emotional importance attached to it. It's almost like trying to remember a whisper while standing in the middle of a busy crowd. The information arrived, but your brain never gave it enough attention to properly store it. Psychologists don't call this forgetfulness. They call it prioritization, because your mind had more important things to focus on. Connection, safety, social interaction, and unfortunately the name simply lost the competition. Researchers have even discovered something called the next-in-line effect, and chances are you've experienced it many times. While someone is introducing themselves, your mind is already busy preparing your own response. You're thinking about what you'll say next. You're trying not to sound awkward. You're hoping to make a good impression. And because your attention is focused on your own upcoming performance, you only partially hear what the other person is saying. You heard the name, but you never truly processed it. Which explains why so many people forget a name almost immediately after hearing it. Not because they weren't listening, but because their brain was already occupied with something else. And surprisingly, people who struggle with names often excel at remembering something far more important: experiences, stories, conversations, emotions. Because some minds are built to remember meaning, not labels. And here's where things become even more interesting. People who forget names easily are often people whose brains work through association. They naturally remember things that carry meaning, stories, ideas, emotions, moments. Everything inside their memory is connected like a giant network. But names are different. Names are islands. They don't automatically connect to anything, and associative minds don't navigate isolated information very well. This is one reason writers, artists, and highly creative people often joke about being terrible with names. Not because they're absent-minded, but because their brains prioritize meaning over labels. They may forget your name, but they'll remember how you made them feel. They'll remember the conversation you had 3 years ago. They'll remember the advice you gave them. They'll remember the joke that made them laugh. Because those things carry emotional weight. Names often don't. But there's another factor most people never consider: attention. When you meet someone new, you're rarely fully present. Part of your mind is focused on the conversation. Another part is thinking about yourself. Maybe you're worried about saying something stupid. Maybe you're feeling nervous. Maybe you're wondering whether they like you. Maybe you're scanning the room or thinking about something else entirely. And all it takes is one tiny distraction. Because memory is fragile, researchers have found that new information needs focused attention in order to move from temporary awareness into actual memory. But introductions happen incredibly fast. A name appears, and seconds later, the conversation moves on. Before your brain has a chance to file the information properly, it's already gone. And then something unfortunate happens. You realize you've forgotten, and panic arrives. Suddenly, your mind starts searching frantically. What was it? Michael? Daniel? David? You know you heard it. You know they told you. But the harder you try to remember, the more impossible it becomes. That's because stress and memory are terrible partners. Anxiety steals mental resources. Instead of focusing on the conversation, your brain becomes obsessed with solving the mystery. And ironically, the pressure itself blocks retrieval. It's like trying to catch a butterfly by chasing it. The harder you run, the farther away it flies. And this creates a cycle many people know all too well. You forget the name, you panic. The panic makes remembering harder, which creates even more anxiety. And suddenly, you're trapped in a conversation while secretly hoping somebody else says their name first. But perhaps the most comforting truth is this: forgetting names doesn't mean you don't care. Quite the opposite. Sometimes your brain is so busy experiencing the person in front of you that it simply fails to store the label attached to them. You remember their smile, their energy, their laughter, the feeling they gave you. Because human beings are emotional creatures before they're information processors, and emotions often leave deeper footprints than words. There's also something fascinating happening inside the brain that most people never hear about. Memory and emotion are deeply connected. Whenever something feels exciting, meaningful, or emotionally important, the brain releases chemicals that signal, "This matters. Save this." That's why you can remember an embarrassing moment from 10 years ago, or a song you haven't heard since high school, or the exact words someone said that changed your life. Emotion creates memory, but names? Most introductions don't carry much emotion. They're quick, routine, forgettable, which means the brain often treats them as background information. And that's why memory champions can do something that seems impossible. They can memorize hundreds of names in minutes, not because they're born with extraordinary brains, but because they've learned a secret. They turn names into stories, images, connections, meaning. They give isolated information a bridge, and that's exactly what your brain needs. So if you've spent years feeling embarrassed about forgetting names, maybe it's time to stop being so hard on yourself. You're not careless, you're not rude, you're not self-absorbed, and you're certainly not broken. Your brain is simply doing what it was designed to do: filtering, prioritizing, searching for meaning. And perhaps that's not such a terrible thing, because long after people forget the details of a conversation, they often remember something much deeper: how someone made them feel, how someone listened, how someone treated them, how someone made them laugh. Human connection has never been built on perfect memory. It's built on presence, kindness, curiosity, and genuine attention. So the next time someone's name disappears from your mind, don't panic. Just ask again. Warmly, honestly, most people won't be offended, because the truth is, almost everyone has experienced the exact same thing. We've all stood there smiling while our brain desperately searched through an empty room, and maybe there's something strangely beautiful about that, because forgetting someone's name doesn't mean you didn't care. Sometimes it means your mind was too busy experiencing the person behind the label. And honestly, that's not the worst mistake a human being can make. So if you've quietly felt embarrassed about this for years, I hope this video gave you something even more valuable than a memory trick. I hope it gave you peace, because understanding yourself removes shame. And sometimes that's exactly what psychology is meant to do. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. There are millions of people out there wondering if they're the only ones who do this. And maybe this message is exactly what they need to hear. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, being human was never about remembering everything. It was always about connecting with what truly matters.